Welcome to our onboard hospitality video slot designed to keep the conversations between airlines and suppliers going through these toughest of times and help us all find our way through to the future. We're Zoom calling key players in our sector, asking them one big question on the future of in-flight service relevant to their area of expertise. And with me today is Sandra Pineau-Boddison, formerly with United and Continental Airlines, where during her tenure she has had responsibility for multiple areas, including onboard service, catering, customer experience, regional operations and customer contact centres. And she's now an independent consultant working with the Hayward Partnership. So welcome, Sandra, and thanks for joining us. And I know you're based in the US, so tell us first a little bit about how life is there at the moment and how things look in your new normal.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Julie. It's great to be here. I think the one thing, we've all become Zoomers. We're all very experienced with Zoom calls now. I had one a couple of days ago for 3.5 hours and 9 participants. So it was quite a lengthy one, but productive.
Yeah.
I still would prefer to see people in person. And thinking through where we're at today, actually, here in the US, I think the last time we saw each other was actually at the Onboard Hospitality Judging Awards.
Yes.
At the beginning of March, and we were talking COVID and we were talking other things, but little did we know how quickly, I think within 2 weeks after that, we were kind of right in the middle of all of it. And here in the US, I would say we probably make the news quite a bit. It is a pretty challenging situation, I think. I think it's slowly improving, but it's like the rest of the world. In March, everyone pretty much shelter at home, social distancing, businesses closing that weren't essential. So we saw a lot of that at the end of March, similar to other parts of the world. And then from there, we kind of saw a reopening in May. So restaurants opened to 25%, 50%, 75%, and salons and different things. And maybe we did it a little quickly. And so I kind of call it a yo-yo. We're kind of going back a little bit to where restaurants are maybe now 50%, and we're taking it a little more slowly. I'll say that masks are way more prevalent than they were before. And again, the social distancing. So we're all experiencing that. We have the unique dynamic of having all of our states, and some of them have different regulations than others. Texas right now is on the hot spot, and I mean that pretty literally. The last 2 weeks has been over 100 degrees, and I don't think that's necessarily curbed the virus at this point, but hopefully we're optimistic that we're starting to see a little bit of improvement, and again, business is coming back, so we're optimistic. Also watching the rest of the world to where we can start traveling again.
Great. Well, it's nice to know you've got a little bit of optimism and sort of looking through, working your way through it, and we're all trying to do bit by bit. But it's great. Thank you very much for taking some time to chat with me, because I thought it would be a good time to tap into some of your airline experience and just try to kind of understand a little more about what procurement and in-flight operations teams are going through right now. Obviously, it's a tough time for them, and you've seen it from the inside in the past. So I think our one big question for you is, how can airline buyers best use this period of enforced operational slowdown to try and find some positives for the future, do you think?
Yeah, I think we're all going through that personally and professionally, and nothing more than the airlines too, and certainly with the buyers, procurement, and food services. I can only imagine and empathize the challenging times right now, and it is about looking for the positive. From my experience, when we had the procurement team, and most of my 26 years, I did have food services and the onboard services and the catering arena. And procurement for us was a business partner. And so the buyers and procurement would support food services, onboard services, which would be considered more of an internal customer, but we were hand in hand. So procurement would be the ones that would support us when we were looking at sourcing product, looking at contracting, negotiating, and so forth. So I'll just kind of take it from that lens, because I view it as a real partnership when you look at procurement and the food services team. So, current situation, in looking at the positive, I think that they are still very focused on identifying the needs today, the health and safety needs. So making sure that the PPE equipment, making sure that touchless environment is being promoted, making sure that social distancing as much as possible. So they are looking for those new sources of products, whether it's masks or wipes or individual package type of food items that's boarded to limit right now some of the interaction. In the medium term, you're starting to see some of the airlines, certainly the US airlines as well, increase their flights for August. Some pull back a little because of the yo-yo effect. We're kind of going through the second round, but you're starting to see that. And what I would say is that it's really an opportunity to start exploring what does onboard services, what does in-flight look like as we ramp up. Everyone's sort of been dormant for a little while. And what I always say is catering and in-flight and onboard is almost underestimated sometime in the complexity, because when you're going 100 miles an hour and then all of a sudden you stop and you ramp back up, you've really got to be ready for that. So it's working close with the partners to make sure that happens. And then in the long term, it's really looking at what's the new normal. We talk about that word and we're probably going to use it to death, but the new normal, some things will stay in place and some things won't. So after 9/11, we had certain security procedures and things like that that stayed in place. And so what will happen and what will become part of the new norm later is really anyone's guess. I think everyone's very transparent, saying we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what it's going to look like. Customers will drive some of that, what makes them comfortable flying again. So I think the procurement and the in-flight group have to stay close to that and keep a pulse on that. And then in the meantime, I think right now is really staying open to new ideas and innovation. A lot of the airlines have taken the magazines off as an example. So is there a digital alternative? Does that tie into the app of the airline? How can you look at new products that are out there? I remember one thing, when we would look at galleys, it was always a challenge to justify, garbage disposals, because it was very valuable space for galleys. And so does the service change at some point? Does that support kind of the health and safety aspect of it? Are there self-serving carts or things like that, that as you start looking at the long term, are things in there for positive changes that are permanent versus just kind of in this transition that we're going in? And staying informed. I mean, we've talked about this before. There's a lot of webinars out there. There's a lot of expos, conferences. It's really about staying close to the supplier partners, the caterers, as well as the other airlines, to see what's out there and to see how we start defining the future and the positive impact that this will take. There will be some changes, I think, that come through that will have a long-lasting positive impact.
And with so many aircraft actually grounded and immediate passenger demands reduced, is it a good opportunity, in fact, to review the whole in-flight offer and completely rethink the processes and perhaps the people or the suppliers that they work with? I mean, is it perhaps a chance to sort of fully assess what stock they actually hold, their full inventory, and where it is in the world? Because it's quite a complex sort of setup, isn't it, that airlines are managing?
It is. And I do think it's a great time to reevaluate just the entire in-flight, onboard, the processes, how warehouse distribution, all of those areas, because I think as we look at our industry, and again, we've pretty much gone to 90% reduction in capacity, and that's pretty dramatic. I think with that reduction in capacity, it will also give the time and opportunity to evaluate what areas need improvement, what areas need redefinition. And just inherently with everything that's going on, they're going to look different. There's suppliers that never thought they would probably be doing sanitizer wipes or PPE equipment or self-enclosed food, and they're really starting to redefine that space. So I think it's very good to evaluate it. I think also snapshot in time, don't define it too closely, because things will change. We've already seen that. What is making customers feel comfortable to fly? It's changing all the time, I think. You kind of hear the magic word of vaccine out there in terms of a recovery, that we're sort of looking at that. So in the meantime, what are the elements that will make customers feel comfortable to fly? And so we've already seen carriers that have removed, as an example, alcohol, and then we've already seen them put the beer and wine back on in self-contained containers. So to redefine something permanently right now, I think is a little premature, obviously, because we know we're still going through the progression of what it's going to look like. And then, I think it's looking at the risk of disruption, minimizing the risk. When something like this happens, I think if anything, it puts a magnifying glass on areas of an airline's procurement or in-flight onboard that are at more risk. So are you looking at where you manufacture? Should it be brought closer? Is there more control that's needed over it? There's just a lot of influence. I don't think any of us would have thought where we are today. If you asked 6 months ago, we're in kind of a very surreal place. But it's kind of blown up what our true reality is, and it's saying, should we look at things? Cost is a factor, of course. But minimizing risk, I think, is another factor. One thing that I always think is interesting, you talked about complexity of airlines, is I remember when we were part of an alliance group and we would say, oh, we're going to get great volume discounts because we can combine our quantities. Well, 150 million of something like cups plus another 100 million is almost more of a problem than it is helping in terms of volume discounts and things. And so when you look at the supplier base and caterers, it's really about working through that. And, airlines will come out of this smaller probably, but then ultimately they will grow again. But the complexity of the airline is really a challenge because sometimes you don't have the capacity to actually produce all that an airline needs. And so it's making sure through the supply chain there's some security and backup with that. So I think it's an interesting dynamic going forward too.
So we might find a sort of new ways of doing things and new processes and new logistics and new, slightly different supply chains work better going forward.
Sure. And in our industry, sometimes you see brokers, whether it's in food or wine or other areas, but brokers that represent the smaller producers or suppliers or manufacturers, because for those groups, at times it's kind of overwhelming with airlines and what the requirements are and what the complexity is. And so, I've always found to have strong support through kind of a broker relationship helps as well in areas where the volume may not be as high, but you want to get some unique products there. So I think things like that, I think will start to get kind of redefined as we look at the way forward and the best way to minimize the risk.
Right. So I think that's quite exciting in some regards, isn't it? Because it does sort of suggest that this is a moment where creative thinkers and sort of people who are willing to innovate and who can come up with innovative ideas, this is kind of their moment, really. That airlines are sort of receptive to those sorts of conversations and are looking for those sorts of things, which is, we're in a time when we're in a downturn and it feels all a bit gloomy. Actually, something could rise from the ashes that could be quite exciting and quite kind of new and thrilling. Do you agree?
I agree. I definitely agree. I think the one thing too that this has done is, who would have ever thought? I remember coming back from the UK when we did the judging, and I remember the night that I was watching the news and our borders were closed and you couldn't travel. And I thought, it was so surreal because we are so used to being able to control pretty much everything. So, and we are an industry at times because of the complexity that maybe lots of innovation happening, lots of digital experiences, touchless points already happening. This is going to accelerate that. So I think we've actually made strides there. I think now it's almost as if after this, everyone says, I'm going to appreciate this more, I'm going to do this more, I'm going to be more open-minded to this. It's really kind of jolted us because it's a situation that is pretty extreme when you're not able to travel or you're not able to go out and do some of the things that you should be able to do, to go to a restaurant or something without wearing a mask. And there's the big mask debate. But I think it's jolted us in a way that, maybe from that's sort of our benchmark. So anything else in terms of change, we're actually open to more change because we've had this situation that's really kind of shook us a bit.
Great. Well, I'm going to end it there because I think that's a great note to finish on, that we all just embrace the jolt and sort of take the punch to the belly and then regain our breath and go forward to greater things, which, hopefully this is a very creative industry, isn't it? They sort of always do manage to reinvent themselves. And of course, this is harder perhaps than some occasions, but let's look to the positive and embrace the jolt.
Yeah, and I would say one thing too is it's about the partnerships as airlines redefine themselves and suppliers as well, continuing to build those strong partnerships. I know for myself, my colleagues at the Hayward Partnership, we're so passionate about this industry and the success of the industry, and we want to see it survive and come out stronger, and I know we will. So thanks for the opportunity to be able to share, and I look forward to the next time we actually see each other in person.
Indeed, yes. Thank you so much, Sandra. That's great. Thank you.